Good afternoon and welcome to Hard Talk with Marsha Walker. I was just checking my phone. Our guest is not logged on yet. Um, so I don't want to actually go into another conversation and then he logs on. Um, David, are you there? Do you think we can
Yes, I'm hearing
entertain?
you. I'm
Do
hearing
you
you.
think we can play a song just for maybe one more song?
Well, I've been told not to play any music during the program
Okay, okay, okay.
by YouTube.
Okay, so my 5 o'clock guest is, I'm now messaging, and he's actually saying that he can possibly come on earlier. So that way, what I can do is maybe just speak a little bit. David, can you put the could you give them the times, the talk times and stuff? Because I can't speak to my guests. Um, I have a very controversial take on, I guess, a trending topic right now. Um, So maybe I could take some cuss from our guests on my controversial take. And then, as I say, I could speak about, there's a lot that I can't speak about on my own, but I do have, we talk. I actually have at 5 o'clock joining me is the director and the deputy director of the Police Complaints Authority, David West and Michelle Solomon. So I don't want to get in, like, I don't want to get, because if you guys know me, domestic violence, is close to my heart. So I could talk about that for 2 hours on my own. So I don't want to start domestic violence and then I'm supposed to have an economist joining us and then go back to the budget. And then, David, you understand what I'm saying? David, I'm
Of
trying to
course.
show your face there. See, this how me talking to a black screen. Just, so
You
let me
guarantee that
ask.
in here.
Let me ask if you let me all right. So he's possibly, like, once Mr. West confirms that he can come on as early as 4:30, then you
Yes.
know what? I'm gonna just go into the whole domestic violence talk. And then, it'll be a domestic violence show. We could talk domestic violence, we could talk bullying. I did ask him to talk about the TTPS in general, all the issues that are plaguing the country. And of course, we continue to talk. A lot of people say, the police are doing their work, the police are doing their work.
Hmm.
All right, great. So David West will join me at 4:30. Um, I actually did a promo video. Hold on, huh? Right. Okay, so I actually did a promo video. Well, it wasn't meant to be a promo video for today. But it was a video on the whole, right? Just a video. And then I said, we're gonna be talking about it and whatnot. But as I said, domestic violence. So I knew that we had a domestic violence report that was put out by the Police Complaints Authority last month. And then we had uh a domestic violence consultation or whatever, put on by the Office of the Attorney General. And all of this came basically on the heels of a judgment. I don't know if you remember, David, Samantha Isaac, but that was in 2017. And very much like Jada now, the country, some news stories sort of capture the attention of the country, and we all become enraged. It was sort of like a pariah tragedy as well.
Mhm.
And this Samantha Isaac story, captured the country at the time, and everybody was so upset, and we failed her, and this and that. And of course now, and this is this is where I say, I say things whether, however it fall. I speak in, and if it fall in your garden and it upset you, well, so be it. But what we have is this kind of temporary 9-day wonder rage. We mad at it, and then after a while, that's it. Nobody cares about it anymore. Nobody remembers anymore, and they go about their business liming.
Hmm.
That is not going to cause real change, because the government know Just get them a distraction and they'll be fine. You know,
Mm.
like tell KFC raise their prices, and all of a sudden we'll forget about Jaden and we'll forget about the bullying crisis that we had long time ago. I posted a video. I did a parenting show, and that video would have been in 2018. And I'd interviewed a young girl. So we did something called confessions, where people, their identities are covered. And they are free to speak exactly what's going on. And she talked about bullying normal. You know, we have cutting, we have smoking, they have sex in schools. And she was talking about all the stuff that goes on in school. And she was saying bullying is normal.
Mm.
So the way that we get on, and we get in a fit of rage as though, so y'all didn't know bullying going on all the time, but nobody standing up with their placard, nobody doing anything about it, nobody really doing something about it. So y'all feel, and I don't know if it's to stroke your own guilty conscience, because you very well know you're not doing anything about it. We feel that if we get on social media every day, maybe, and not even everybody gets on social media every day. So I think that this is like a fake outrage, because you feel it. Okay, do you really feel it? This kind of 2-second, 9-day feeling can't work. We have to get past this temporary rage that we feel and develop a consistent attitude of hard work, a consistent attitude towards activism. So Samantha Isaac was in 2017, December 2017. The case was actually a judgment for that case. So we took the mother took the government to court to basically say, listen, the police service, the state failed to protect my child. How many cases? People don't even, how many times I would say, I can get a lawyer to represent you free of charge. And my lawyer that I want to represent is lawyers. I mean, I have Anand Ram Logan as one of my lawyers. So it ain't no small lawyer. It's lawyers that you know. And they're doing it pro bono. They're willing to take on the state pro bono to fight for the justice of citizens. And they'll say, nah, you know what? Just leave vengeance to God. And there's a space to leave vengeance to God. But I always say, Nehemiah, some of these people, if God had tell David, pick up, if they were David, they would have said, I don't need a stone. Thank you very much. I'll just leave it to God and God will slay Goliath. God slayed Goliath through David and his stone. That's how it works. God uses people. So sometimes what you need to do is actually open your mouth, actually use your hands, actually use your feet, and get to work every single day. And I told people that, I said, let me tell you all something. And the situation with Jaden under investigation, how many of y'all are going to remind the media to keep at the various authorities to say, Minister of Education, do we have an update on Jaden? Minister of Education, do we have an update on Jaden? I ask people, how many of y'all know the names of the children in the Judith Jones report? Because the Judith Jones report was another one where we went up all over the place. We were all over the place with the Judith Jones report. I can tell you one child name was Tia. Tia, I know her name because I sat and I read the report. And I have asked questions. What is the update on Tia? Y'all know the update on Tia? Nobody know the update on Tia? Anybody asking anymore? But the government knows that the citizens not going to, years later, remember Tia. Nobody's going to ask about her. Nobody's going to call her name. Nobody's going to call the situation by name and say, give me a specific update on this young lady. Give me the update. So they know they could get away with what they want because we're going to be riled up, take the jamming for a day or two on the internet and move along. We as a citizen, as citizens, as we have to understand our power and we have to keep the anger for more than 9 days. We have to keep it for 9 years. I talk about the barrier divers all the time. These people still draw a pay. These people will retire with their pension intact. We've moved on. All the candlelight vigil, we have moved on. We don't have the stamina to keep up and keep up the fight. So you see when people come at me, Boy, the kinds of stuff only God, because you don't have the stamina when every day and night I am at it, asking the media, asking the citizens to keep up the fight, keep up the pressure. That kind of anger all you have on the first 2 days, keep it up. So as I say, Samantha Isaacs in 2017, the mother did the right thing. Kudos to the mother. The mother didn't say, you know what, let me leave it here. Because she understands that if she fights the system, maybe something will be done. So in 2024, in May 2024, Justice Robin N. Muhammad, he delivered what would be called a landmark judgment. It means that we can use these judgments later on in other cases. So you've now set a precedent. And so in the judgment, the Justice Muhammad said that, the TTP has failed.
Let
And
me interrupt you here. Mariano is on the system now.
oh, all right, fine. So we're gonna talk budgets. I'm gonna end my hold on, my rant on domestic violence. Hi, Mr. Brown.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
I am fine, thank you.
I hope everything is fine. I didn't realize you were ranting on domestic violence. No.
Yes, I was, because I told them that while you wait on you to join us, I didn't want to, because I knew that I was going to get red. I could talk about domestic violence for 2 hours, and then I'd have to settle down and go into a more a interviewer kind of role, which is different to me ranting about domestic violence. But we are talking domestic violence at 5 p.m. So I'm gonna stop now. And we're gonna go into something a little bit more sober, not as emotional as the budget, though it's very important. I actually have a question here, which should have been a bit later on in the conversation, but I guess just because of how things operate.
Yes.
Do we care? Do you feel as though the country, the average man on the street, like how we argue about KFC or doubles or whatever, do you feel as though there is a sense where the country really cares about the budget other than minimum wage or pension being increased? Do you think they understand things like transfer pricing, the importance of finally getting it done? Do you think they understand really the Dragon deal and the implications of the US and Venezuela relations? What do you feel about that?
You're talking to me?
Yes, you think citizens care.
I don't think you should write off the public in terms of what they see. You will expect that in some instances that they would be a little jaded. So, for example, what people always want to know is how does this translate in it's like Wi-Fi, and what's in it for me? All right, that's what one of the key things, and that's one of the reasons why the minister, in presenting his budget speech, was at pains to identify. Anytime anybody has to go into such a huge length of detail to justify the current level of expenditure, the suggestion is that the man in the industry doesn't see it as having worked for him. So he has to give them deliberate and decided advantages. Right? So you notice he was at pains to point out, and we did this, and we did that, and we did it in this area. In fact, a long part of the speech was spent with regard to what we would call physical infrastructure, and physical infrastructure in certain places. So the answer to that is yes, you have to have that. And at the same token, you also have to try to paint a bigger picture. The purpose of any government is to, whether you like it or not, government can't do everything. It can't. It really requires buy-in and involvement. So you have to address it from a perspective in terms of showing, well, these are the things that matter and this is how I'm involved. So I think that's what he was attempting to do. Now, you will get people, of course, because by definition, people have biases. They're predisposed to taking positions. So some people will see it as working for them, and some people will say, but he's saying the same thing over again, and I didn't see any results, right? So nobody's really done a poll to say where it is. But the reality is, and we have gone through a very difficult period. So let's start off by saying that the Minister of Finance was in a very difficult position, that we've been through before. And not as perhaps on this occasion, we were in a lot better position. And what do I mean by that? You had the Heritage and Stabilization Funds. When the PNM came into office in 2015, they had a far bigger foreign reserve position. But so those are the positives at the start. The negatives are that the revenue position had declined substantially, and therefore there was a sharp decline in the quantum of expenditure that government spent. In 2015, 2014 going to 2014, going into 2015, the UNC administration had a budget number of approximately 60 billion, 60 billion in expenditure and $59 billion in terms of revenue. When the PNM came into office, the situation was decidedly the reverse, right? So they ended up with about 40 or just about $42 billion in revenue. I'm speaking off the top of my head without the advice of the facts. But they ended up with a substantially difficult position. So how does one address that? How does one deal with that? So you have to, if you bring the expenditure down immediately, the country goes immediately into a tailspin. So they had to borrow, so they had a deficit, and the situation got worse in 2016. So what you'll find is that on a consistent basis over the last 10 years, the revenue situation has been challenged, and as a result, the expenditure position has been challenged. So this year you have an expenditure of $59 billion, just under 60. And the last time we did that was in 2014. So you're spending exactly the same amount in 2015 as you would have spent. In fact, you're spending less than you spent in 2014. So when you look at it on a comparative basis, it has been government expenditure has declined over time in absolute dollars, and because of the impact of inflation, it has also declined in real terms, so that the man in the street will be getting less bang for his buck from that perspective. But the issue really is that the revenue position has been weak. And if you look at it over a long-term period, well, what you recognize is that there is a consistent gap between government's revenue and government expenditure. And the gap has never narrowed. If you were to drop two trend lines on the numbers, you will see that the revenue has gone up, but the expenditure has always been higher than the revenue. So in real terms, you'll have to say that government is buying less goods and services in 2025 than it did in 2014. And from that perspective, the man in the street is not as well off. That's the reality. Those are the
David, are you hearing me, or is the exact same thing happening with my laptop again? I've lost Mr. Brown.
All right. You lost me?
No, I've not lost you. Are you hearing?
I'm hearing you, yes.
Okay. And David, you heard Mr. Brown there just now. He froze for a minute. Is it? David?
Well, David froze too.
It would appear so. Yes, I lost the last thing that you said.
Well,
you were talking about the gap. Yeah, so the gap, and it hasn't changed. I was waiting for you to finish to ask you basically, do you think that the government has done a good job in improving the revenue situation though? And
there's no they don't have too many degrees of freedom. All right. So ask yourself, what does government have control of? Right? What they can control is the rate of tax. That's the first point. In other words, how much you pay, right, on a given dollar. And the one thing that you don't want to do when in a situation when times are tight is to increase the level of taxation, because that really reduces the level of disposable income in the hands of the consumer, and that acts as a damper to, if you want, consumer confidence and so on. They did raise taxes. They did raise taxes effectively by introducing property tax after 9 years. Last time anybody would have paid land and building taxes was in 2008, going into 2009, and nothing has happened. So there is property tax. There have been some increases. So, for example, we moved from 25 to 30 to 35 for businesses that were making more than $1 million. They paid 30 in the first instance. And profit, if they were making more than $1 million profit, they paid 30%. And the rest, everybody else paid 25. And the same thing for individuals. Individuals earning less than $1 million paid 25%. And those who earn more paid 30%. And then we went up a notch again. There's a 35% on banks and a couple other businesses which were in a particular category. Right? So there has been a rate of taxation increase. But the fundamental issue is that the economy in large measure is driven by the energy sector. And that's one of the reasons why people have always been complaining that you need to spend more time on diversification. Now, and that means diversifying away from the energy sector. So two things that are important in the energy sector: the volume you produce and the price that you get. And what has been happening is that we are in secular decline in the energy sector. We've declined from a high of 4.2 billion cubic feet a day to the moment we're just about 2.5. Last year we averaged 2.6. So there's a 4 to 5% reduction last year, and there would have been a reduction from the year before, and so on. So we're in a continuous decline on the revenue side. And when the minister said in 2022 and 2023 that the economy had started to grow again, well, that was a bit of an overstatement. Right? I put it nicely. What really happened was the price of those products went up. So you're producing less, but you get more for each product. And on that basis, the revenue recovered and the economy went through a bit of a positive impact during that period. Now, what has happened again is, if you notice, notwithstanding that was the result of the Ukraine war and the resumption of COVID. Now, since then, notwithstanding the war, notwithstanding all the developments in the Middle East, what we are seeing is that energy prices have been declining. So you're not in that fortunate position again. At one stage, the price of ammonia. Ammonia is important for agriculture production as a feedstock, which goes into what we call fertilizers and so on. The price reached as high as $1,500 a ton. And when they were operating before, at something in the region of between $200 and $300 a ton. So you're talking about a 500% increase. And that is what helped the economy. So there was the underlying trend, in other words, is one of a sort of consistent position with some growth, small, but not enough to compensate for the declines in the energy sector. And that's why on a long-term basis, it's important to get other parts of the other sectors exporting. So the economy, notwithstanding everything that you want to say, the economy is not performing as well as it should.
And that's why I asked in terms of whether or not, and that's why I asked whether or not whether or not the government really is managing the revenue as well as it could, because using a kind of, I guess, a female term, but it's like a victim mentality. So you seem to be, and I know that the term is, like we're price takers. So we seem to be just at the behest of whether somebody has a war, and I feel almost like, well, when prices used to be high, that was a good thing for us, but now we don't know if it's a good thing for us. And it just seems as though we are like victims. We are all looking on, well, what's the geopolitical landscape? What's going on elsewhere? How are we going to live based on something else? Rather than, taking our destiny into our own hands and saying, look, this love affair that we have with I think it's Dr. Sejuan said, we need to end the love affair with oil and gas. Mm-hmm. And even now, I'm going to quote, I think Dr. Atz was the one that said, expectations on the proposed benefits of Dragon deal need to be lowered. What we see is that, now we're saying, okay, well, 2027 is going to come. So we keep putting all our hope into this sector, and then saying, well, it didn't perform, so that's why we didn't have revenue. And how long? And then the Minister of Public Administration, Alison West, had the audacity, if you ask me, is the audacity to say that no one's giving suggestions, that everyone's calling for diversification, but rarely does she hear any suggestions. And I'm like, what, lady? Really? We've been having a detailed conversation on this for years, for generations. And that's why I ask if you think that they've really done a good job at managing the income. And by that, I specifically meant, how about we look for and really look? There are other countries in this world, in this region, and sometimes I wonder if oil and gas was a blessing or a curse.
Yeah, well, okay, that's fair comment too. All right, so here's the problem, and this is where government has to be careful in its language. What really drives the economy? That's a question I'm asking you.
I don't know. You tell me.
The private sector.
Oil and gas.
No, the private sector. That's the point. It's the private sector. So
in Trinidad?
Yep, in every country. In every country.
No, that's why I asked in Trinidad, because I do feel that the government has a lot of overreach in Trinidad where they should.
It does, because it is involved in a sector which is literally exogenous. Most of the inputs that goes into the energy sector are bought from somewhere else. They come in. And what you do, and the price is determined, is big numbers, big volumes. So it has a bigger bang, whereas the number of companies, an Answer McCall, for example, or a Neela Massey, is nowhere near the size of a BP, or nowhere near the size of a Shell. All right, and the revenues that generated in that sector is substantially larger, and therefore the tax revenues generated in that sector is substantially larger. So you really are depending. So if you shift the energy aside and say that's 30%, there's 70%. Now the answer is, does that 70% exist independently of the energy sector? And the answer to that is no.
No. No.
Right? So
exactly.
What you have to do, all right, is to try to get those little independent movements moving upwards and to export more. Now, our export strength has been in the non-energy sector, has largely been in the area of what one would call food and drink, that light manufacturing, where we import to export. That's fine. All right, that's fine. Japan, for example, imports 99% of all its raw materials, but is a substantial exporter. And the difference is intellectual property. It understands and can produce in areas in which it can convert low-valued inputs into high-valued outputs. Now, Trinidad is not at that level. What makes the difference with Trinidad getting there? Right? And what is the real strength of an economy? And the answer is the people, intellectual property. Right? So you have to raise the standard of your workforce and raise their vision from doing the kind of retail and distributed to what else can we do that could add value in a way that improves our export earnings at all levels. Now that's the important point, and that's the critical take. But because the energy sector is so big and has such a big contribution, there's always the tendency, right, to rely on it because it's big. If you have a big brother and you could go to the big brother and the big brother will help pull you out of a jam, right? There's less tendency or less capacity for you to be able to do it on your own. And that, unfortunately, because of its size and because of a long period of depending on the energy sector. So what do you do to kickstart it? What do you do to get people to move away from it? Well, all of those changes are unfortunately difficult. And they do mean that in the short run, you will have some loss of your standard of living. So what the government has been doing, the government's policy over the last 10 years is more or less equal to a government's policy between the period 1981 to 1985, a soft landing, right? To cushion the belt, So, and most people don't remember that, but in the period 1981 to 1985, there were a set of funds which had been built out of the revenue earnings, but those funds were all run down to subsidize what one calls recurrent expenditure on food, expenditure on wages and salaries, which does not move your economy. Now, those are hard decisions. And in the last part of the budget speech, the minister rubbished, he basically threw everybody, all the commentators who said, well, you have to make some hard decisions. He said, well, we've made the hard decisions. We closed Petrotrin, right? And if you wanted us to do X, Y, and Z with the exchange rate and so on, it would, of course, damage to the social fabric, and it would, of course, this and so on and so forth. But the issue is, you have to look, if you were to look at the analysis of a country's performance, what would you pay attention to?
Well, the standard of living, I think.
Well, how do you measure that?
Gross domestic product. I don't know. I mean, well, we have the.
Okay.
You have.
All right.
I would
Stick a pin.
Okay.
Stick a pin. If you're a financial controller in a company, right? A government is not a company, but that's usually the analogy.
Yeah.
All right. And you wanted to evaluate the company. What would you want to know about the company? One, you would want to know if it's making profit, and by definition, that profit is in cash. And you'd want to make certain
cash flow should be healthy.
Right. And you'd want to make certain that the debt is not too high. Correct?
Yeah.
Right. So that means that it could do other things.
Yeah.
Right? Because that gives you what is called sustainability, or if you want operating room. You could make other investments that could help you move forward.
All right.
All right. So if you take that analogy and you look at the Trinidad and Tobago economy, the two things that you'd want to look at, what is the national debt position? And the answer, the national debt position went from 36 billion in 2014 to 140 billion in 2024. So the debt has been going up. When your debt goes up, what happens?
Well, you have to pay more.
That's correct. So your debt service ratio has been going up. When your debt service ratio has been going up, you mean you have to move money from other things to pay the debt service ratio. In the mid-year budget speech, the minister was very interesting. He said that this costs $1 billion every year, and everybody would think that $1 billion, the extended debt service. He didn't say that it was $1 billion US. He didn't say, right? So the real effect in that debt service ratio is that you're spending about $6 to 7 billion, right? And that has been rising. That's not small, right? $6 to 7 billion is a fair amount in terms of your national budget, right? So the next thing that you look at, we said we look at cash flow. All right. So if you had to look at a country's cash flow, where would you look at? What would you look at?
Well,
the foreign exchange reserves. Right?
Okay.
That's the closest thing to your bank account. Why? Because almost everything that you buy is going to be imported. Most everything you're going to be buying is imported. So what we have is I wouldn't say an E. I can't think of it. All right, take a V and make the V and put the V on it on sideways. You get the debt going up and you get the reserves going down. They're both going in the wrong direction. So to talk about growth is not very helpful, because if your economy has to grow fast enough for you to be able to reduce your debt and for you to increase your foreign exchange reserve, and it's not doing that. So a rate of growth of 1.9% is not what Trinidad and Tobago needs. Trinidad and Tobago needs to grow at the rate of 5 and 6 and 7% to basically start changing the angle of the graphs, right? We need to get the loan position down, and we need to get the foreign reserve position up, right?
How do we do that? I mean, because it sounds to me as though you're very sympathetic to the government.
You're fine.
I'm surprised. I'm actually really surprised, because it sounds... here, it sounds to me that you are saying that, listen, they are in a hard position.
But it is true. It is true.
Well, yes, they are. But
it's true.
But have they put themselves in that position? Have they done everything that they can do to get out of the position?
Here's the problem, and this is the real problem. if you do what is in the national interest,
The country will riot.
are people going to like it?
Yeah.
Right? And
Lee Kuan Yew.
what is, hold on, let me finish. And what
Okay.
is in my personal interest?
Yeah.
Right? Well, as long as you want to hold on to office, right? You're gonna what you call it, you're gonna fudge the issue. That's the difficulty here. And that's what Marlene Atz is saying. Marlene Atz is saying, hang on a second. If you tell everybody that when Dragon comes on stream, everything is going to go up, well, everybody will postpone, and then in the expectation of things moving upwards. I don't think that's going to be the reality at all. And there's precedent for my statement. The UNC put into position a whole series of incentives that increased the volume of drilling, and therefore more gas was found during the period 2016 to 2017, which is the government's time, the PNM's time in office. The PNM Mr. Imbert was very critical of that. Why? Because it gave the energy sector companies a tax holiday, and his revenue went down. So he had to borrow more money to fill the expenditure gap. And they did find more gas. So we moved the needle from 3.3 billion scuffs a day, standard cubic feet that is, to 3.6. And it lasted for all of about 2 or 3 years. And then it started to go down again. And it has continued downwards ever since. Right? He's given no incentives, so he's maximizing his revenue.
So
right?
do you agree with the UNC's decision back then or no?
Of course I did.
Okay.
The only thing that you could do in these circumstances, but you have to, at the end of the day, you have to manage the expenditure much better. And that's why I'm saying what we are doing, what has happened in the period 2015 to 2025 is more or less a repeat of the policy of 1981 to 1985. We are attempting to create a soft landing on the assumption that prices will go back up and production will come back up. That's not going to happen. So if you think that is sympathetic to the government, it isn't.
Well, okay, so it's not going to happen. So what next? Next?
Then you have to get the business sector, and change does not take place in 5 years. All right.
Well, they've had 9. They've had 9.
Well, they had 9, but so the answer is if you didn't do it at the beginning, you're not going to get it to the end. Right. So
they've had what I think, because I do believe that you should give a government 2 terms. They've had their 2 terms. Mm-hmm. And that's so you spoke about, and I was going to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you now because you're saying that, if they do what it takes, and you're an economist and I'm a TV host and none of us going up, I don't know, but I'm not going up and you're not going up. So we could say the truth, and who don't like it, tough cookies, right? We don't have that unfortunate position to say, well, we need to say what the people want to hear because we want their votes.
Well, that's true. That's fair comment. That's why they don't like me.
Right. No, I'm going to quote Lee Kuan Yew. Something about him, and okay, so his style may not appeal to us in Trinidad at all, but I always use, and I'm going to go back to my girly analogies, right? You have 3 kinds of parents. You have the parent that has a big stick and say, eat your vegetables, boy, you're going to get licks, right? You have the parent that can't be bothered because they're just not interested in parenting and wouldn't have the child eat the vegetables. And if you want to eat candy whole day, so be it. Them go dead anyway, and whatever happens in your future, it matters not. Then you have what I consider to be the good parent. That parent builds a relationship. They get buy-in, a term I heard you use, and they get the child to understand that eating your vegetables is good for you. Yes. They get the child to understand, and there's a relationship. Yes. And Lee Kuan Yew said basically Western governments pander to this. All they're interested in is getting back into power. Yes. They don't do what's necessary. Now, I don't agree that you should, because I think, and I'm going to call it, if you want to, I feel you're well beating around the bush, but I'm going to not beat around the bush. I think Keith Rowley's attitude, he may be doing some of the hard decisions, but his attitude is horrendous. So there isn't a sense of, Mia Motley, I feel like when she finishes with speaking to the country, there is a sense that, you know, she's saying we are in this together. And what you don't get, you know, I think that citizens do not feel as though parliamentarians are in the same boat as them. So
And
you are saying, so for example, I mean, simple, an easy one would be the entertainment and functions budget that went from 860, but less than $1 million. You know, it's either 860, 890, whatever it is, but less than $1 million to $50 million in 2025. And I'm yet to hear a justification. I was waiting for the Standing Finance Committee and, you know, that particular line. And I'm hoping that the opposition really does not accept any kind of, you know, I hope they go hard on them in that particular line. Because, and I feel that that is the challenge, that we don't feel on the ground that the government is feeling the pinch as we are feeling the pinch. So if there was more buy-in where you sit, you explain, I felt you did a really amazing job, and in choosing people to come on the show, because my aim is political education. So I don't want persons that speak in jargon where you just don't understand and you get turned off and you have no idea. So I loved how we were able to break down, well, what does the cash flow look like? That's our foreign exchange. What is profit? And you were able to match things together so anybody can listen and understand. If our government would take the time to do that and really get buy-in, I do not think that Trinidadians are so selfish and far off. I think that we will understand. But what we're seeing is that you spending on vanity projects, and we get the deal.
all right. So perhaps I didn't make my position clear enough to you, but I would have thought that you would have understood when I said that the angles are going in the wrong direction.
They are.
I'm hardly complimenting them, quite the opposite.
So I know you're not complimenting them, but I feel like you're not being hard on them.
Well, no, the answer is
almost like it's kind of like what I feel like Keith Rowley does. Well, what your woman do again?
No.
It's like a victim mentality.
Well, I don't think I'm a victim by any stretch of the imagination. But here's the point, and this is the point that I was attempting to make, and that's why I said that it's the private sector. Right now, quite frankly, the partnership between the public and private sectors is not very helpful and not very strong, so that you find that government does not take a consistent profit. Is not a bad word. It's actually it's socially irresponsible not to make a profit. If you're irresponsible and you what you call it, your business is going to close down. If your business closed down, people are out of business. People have no jobs. Right, your suppliers are affected. So profit is socially responsible, right? But there's something about the government. Whenever we get on a platform, right, we castigate certain aspects of the private sector. That is not helpful to anybody, because by definition, the private sector are the risk takers. Yeah. So you have to help them. If you want the country to grow, you have to make policies which are business friendly. And quite frankly, there's not enough of that. That's my first point. The second point that follows on from that is that there has to have a balance between the private sector and what we will call labor, in the sense of an equal share or share moving forward, right? You have to be able to manage it. And at the moment, I think the private sector will say it's unequal on them. The labor will say, well, hang on a second, it's unequal on us. The reality is that both sides will benefit by growth, but you have to get growth of a sufficient nature and quality for it to work, right? And that means that government has to take on the policies to make certain that happens. And that's the argument, that not enough is being done in that area, right? So it takes two. And the second point I'm going to raise, a third point I'm going to raise from that particular angle, is that change takes time, right? The patron of our business school is Arthur Lockjack. Arthur Lockjack started his business in 1974. 1974, that's 50 years ago. So this is an anniversary. This is the 50th anniversary of the company. But they started from a narrow base, producing for the local market, but they always understood that the local market was never big enough for them, and they had to get bigger, and they would get bigger by exporting. Now, that's what made them strong. bigger by exporting. And the companies that understood that all grew up in a period of austerity. So austerity doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, right? And the SM Jalis of this world, the Bermudas of this world, Arthur Jack, all of them operate in that particular segment of the marketplace. And they all grew within that period, and they're all building what one would call, they're no longer regional, they're building global positions, which is important. But what I'm saying is we now have to concentrate on the other lockjacks which are coming up. And you have to have business-friendly policies for them to get in that particular fashion. And what we've been doing is holding the line, which is no growth for anybody. Nobody's going to go big by that. Right? And if the policies are weighted towards recurrent expenditure, right? Recurrent expenditure is not investment expenditure. That can't get anybody big. And that's all we've done for the last 9 years. Now, my difficulty at this stage, in the sense of, is neither the two political parties have addressed that issue. Neither of the two of them. That's my problem. Right?
When you say they have not addressed it, meaning, so UNC would not address it in 2010 to 2015?
No, they didn't address it then, and they're addressing it now. Okay. Right? Both parties, there's no difference between either party in terms of economic policy. Right? Neither party is prepared to tell the electorate the truth. Right? So how are we going to get any growth? How are we going to get anybody making any kind of decisions moving forward? You have to address it. That's what Ats was saying from the point she was talking to the government, but she could equally be talking to the other side. Right? I mean, for an opposition leader to stand up and say, okay, good, well, I will raise minimum wage from $22 to $25. Well, all right, okay, good. What does that address? That addresses votes. That does not address any change in the economy. That does not address the real issue. That it addresses the bread and butter issues, and some people are gonna buy that because that's vote catching. But it doesn't really address what else you're gonna do when you finish with that, because that's not gonna carry us anywhere. All right. At the end of the day,
you're gonna pay for it.
Right. Well, that's the issue. I mean, and we've been here before. In 2010, to come into office, there was a statement that everybody will get a pension and we do X, Y, and Z. Now, the cost of implementing that decision, because I costed it, I would have been a minister at the time, the Ministry of Finance, right? The cost of that was $3 billion to $4 billion a year. One decision, right? Which was literally 10% of your budget. Now, that can't work. And when they came into office, they didn't do it and didn't do anything along those lines. So the reality is that the same issues that you have with Keith Rowley are the same issues you have with every other politician at the moment. Nobody is dealing with those issues. Nobody is giving you the Lee Kuan Yew answer. This is where we're going to go. Dragon is not going to be, if Dragon ever comes on stream, right? If Dragon ever comes on stream, the effect of Dragon is going to be no different to the effect of Angelino or Jupiter, right? A 10% movement in terms of your daily production. That is not what Trinidad and Tobago needs if you're going to concentrate in the energy sector. So if it's not going to get your bang for the buck from there, then you have to start looking at the other things which are important. That's the failure. And that's the failure of both parties.
Right. Business-friendly policies and change takes time.
Yes.
And tell the country the truth. Those are the three things that, because our time is coming to a close very quickly, right? What do you want? You want to see some political party, some politician give the Lee Kuan Yew answer. Tell the country the truth. You want to see business-friendly policies. Talk to me specifically. What are some of the policies that you want to hear some political parties say? Talk about.
The first issue there, right, in terms of business-friendly policies, is that you have to get your public sector to be more efficient. That's your first point, right? I mean, you're opening papers, you hear about they have a problem with the cancer drugs. They don't have this, they don't have that. Well, and that's because we're trying to run a healthcare system on the cheap. So we build the buildings. You have new hospitals. You could point to the hospital. That's wonderful. What matters is the service. You can't build healthcare tourism if your basic level of healthcare isn't strong. So that's not going to help you. Right. So you have to address the issues. What are the things that you need? How does the country become more productive? How do you generate more foreign exchange? Right. Those are the policies that you have to address. But it also means that government also has to be able to do more with less. Right? And literally, you have to apply for an approval for literally to do anything that you want to do requires some level of government approval. Right. That process can take days. Right. Or weeks. I mean, well, just consider, for example, when last you tried to open a bank account?
Well, I haven't. Actually, I did. I'm now saying I haven't tried in a while, but actually I did, and we gave up. we gave up. But I'm going to hope that it's because that I'm politically exposed. So it
Oh,
was
politically exposed as a problem?
Well,
give me a break.
We went. So my husband was trying to get, and you know the reason? It's because now we're trying to get 2 different credit cards. So if you open an account, so it was actually because of foreign exchange. This is just a nightmare. So you know what? You go open one, so you go get some foreign exchange, and I go get some foreign exchange. You know, we'll have more spending if we have 2 different cards and stuff.
Well, everybody's doing that.
Yeah, so it's just to show you all the antics we have to do. I mean, so we are a small business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just you have to figure out, you're jumping through hoops to figure out how to operate, you know. And so the paperwork, and he just said, oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. Yeah, and you know, he went back and forth, and then when we thought, okay, and then he's like, oh, you're politically exposed, so now we have some more stuff that you have to fill out. I'm like, oh my God.
Well, I was last a minister in 2010. I was I was in the process of buying a car, and the insurance company sent me a form. On the top of the form is are you a politically exposed person? I put yes. So I tell them I'm not buying any insurance. You keep the damn insurance.
Yeah, boy. It's once you take that,
right?
the
I didn't commit any sin. And I've not been I've not been convicted of anything. And the law says 3 years, and I've been out now for 14 years. So how can I still be politically exposed?
Yeah,
right? It's ridiculous. Right.
I asked on Facebook, I said, so wait, I'm forever going to be politically exposed? When does that end? When does it end?
Yeah, well, the answer is the way that they interpret it is never. Yeah. Right? And that's not what the law does. The law says 3 years. Right. So, I mean, if somebody has to carry somebody to court, actually, that's what has to happen. You have to basically carry through and sue the government. Right. And I have a mind.
I have them before the court. Maybe I'll consider another one.
All right. Well, we'll see how it happens. But
we'll see how it goes. Right. So we're talking the policies that you want to see.
Going back to the level of what you call it of business. Right. Going back to the level of basic business. Right. If you have to import or export, then you want your turnaround time at your port. If you've been reading the papers this week, what are you hearing? Right. Well, there's a go slow. Right. A port doesn't operate for 8 hours or 10. A port is a 24-hour process operation. That's what it should be. Right? We don't. The port is open technically for a limited period of time. Then things shut down. They probably will accept ships. The ships could come in and so on. But that's not the matter. The port should be in a constant movement. It's a 24-hour cycle operation. That's what efficiency means. Right? And in terms of the modern day, that's what you want. So it has to do with the logistics, making the logistics easier. And those are things that have to be addressed. You cannot not address them. Right? So those are simple things. Right? And those are the kinds of issues that have to be dealt with on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I agree with that. The chief secretary of the THA, Farley Augustine, he said, you know, there's some myth that building us a new airport will all of a sudden, you know, make the influx of tourists come. And he said that we'd just come back from Margarita, and my husband looked around and thought, you know, first of all, the airport, no fancy airport. Nothing was fancy. Nothing there is fancy. And of course, Margarita is smaller than Trinidad.
Yes.
But the guy who was caretaking the lawn and the property base, the resort, we just stopped and he can't talk English. But, you know, we kind of pointed to, can we get a lounge there outside of our room and stuff? And he made it happen. He didn't say, let me find the manager. He said, well, that's not my work. And everybody served as though, they were making a lot of money. And of course I sat and I had conversation because I'm a politician, I guess, by nature. So I'm gonna have conversation and ask people, and then they talk about how little they make, and we could not believe how little they make. So why they come to Trinidad, and because they can make 3, 4, 5 times just being a laborer on site compared to what they make. But you would never know because they served so well. And so when you spoke about service, I thought to myself, yeah, of course, once you say make the public sector more efficient, I laughed. You didn't have to even speak any more about it. You didn't have to give any more details about it, because it is what it is. And we're going to go into my next guest is the Police Complaints Authority, where I'm going to lambaste the police service, unfortunately. And I want to be fair. I do. We spoke about the police service not the police service, but public service, actually, in a interview gone, where one of my guests said, we need governments who will be prepared to say and do what needs to happen for this public service to have true reform. And again, you want to be fair, because you have things about rat infestation and whatnot. So there has to be, if it is that I don't work in the public sector, so I don't know. I can't say, are they making it up or whatever? I have no idea. But I think every single person can agree with you that the public sector needs reform. It needs to become more efficient. And we need politicians who are willing to do the right things, say the right things. And I don't know, you said change takes time. So maybe the closing comment is that. How long? Because you're speaking about 1981 and
yeah, well, I'm saying that the policies are similar to what the policies were in 1981. And I'm not saying that that we are in 1981 situation, but it's a similar situation.
Similar, yeah.
We are better
how
off.
do we bring that change? How do we get public servants to understand the need for the reform? How do we get citizens to move past hearing somebody's going to raise the minimum wage and thump and cheer and vote for that?
Well, the answer to that is leadership.
Lee Kuan Yew.
The key issue, yes, right, and you have to have the capacity to bring people along. That's what leadership means. Right? You have to have, first of all, you have to have some capacity to make change. Right, that's why you need some space in your budget, what they call fiscal space. You have to have some fiscal space. Right now, we have none. Right, and if you don't create fiscal space, you're not going to change the angle of anything. Right, so it means that you have to become more prudent and tighter in your policies. Straightforward. People are going to be vexed with that. And then,
but as I said, I think that
but that's where leadership comes from.
Yeah, I don't think we have an unreasonable population. I think if you call us to tighten our belt, but we can genuinely see you tightening your belt.
That's what leadership means.
Yeah, I think that we will come on board.
All right, and here's a good opportunity. After all the noise about property tax, what the Trinidadians do, they went and line up to pay their tax. What you could do in those circumstances, at least make it easy for them to pay it. Huh?
Yeah, boy.
That's a straightforward issue. You're asking for people to what you call to be corporate. They're cooperating, they come to pay, right? And you make it hard. Well, hang on. That's a street that has a dead end on that, because eventually, if you get me vexed enough, I'm not going to pay it. Okay, and that's the point I'm making. So the leadership, all right. I asked for X, you responded. At least I could show some positive effect. What did we get? Well, we fix that next year. You didn't know it was going to take place this year? Yeah. So that's my point. So thank you very much for bringing me on. I know that you have some people waiting, and Mr. West can't do anything about the police service, but don't beat him up.
Well, so that is actually the start of, but after him we have Gary Griffith. So
oh dear. Well, I will leave at this point. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, very much.
Take care of yourself.
Bye-bye. Hi, Miss Bash, are you there? Am I talking to myself again, David?
No, she's there.
She's there. Well,
Hi,
I'm good.
Take us up.
Yes. I just so Mr. Brown was a little bit late, so I actually started. I thought I might have had to talk domestic violence. Let me just give you a backdrop. Domestic violence is very dear to my heart. You know, I spoke about growing up with it and all of that. So before I was a politician, you know, I advocated for domestic violence, change in laws and stuff like that, right? So just to give you an idea. So, you know, if I get passionate on real talking, and I'm just letting you know. But I want to thank you for the work that you did. There is a part of I read the whole report because I feel if you did the work, we should read the report. And maybe I should ask you, what do you think? It's the same question I actually started off with my last guest. How do we get Trinidadians interested in these issues? You know, I don't even know how many people have taken the time to read the report. Good afternoon, Mr. West. I just learned that Mr. West plays football with my brother. That's always a big thing.
Is that a winning team or a losing team? I think that's the question.
Mr. West, is it a winning team or a losing team?
What's that now?
Did you play with my brother? Y'all play together, same team, opposite teams? But I just heard that you play with my brother.
Yeah. Now he plays on the younger division.
He younger division?
Yeah.
How old are you?
I'm only 48, but I mean, you know, he plays younger.
Well, then he played out of his age group.
Yeah, he playing young boy. Actually I'm 56, so he plays younger. But I played him on a Sunday morning sometimes by a friend's house.
Okay.
You know, so yeah. So I know Mark very well. He's a nice guy, you know.
So I've heard. Some people tell me.
But
I grew up hearing that you's Riley's sister. I went to play for Queen's Park once, and the first thing I heard is, you can play, you's Riley's sister.
Well, you have hair. You have hair, so that's another.
Yes. I'm going to clip that part and send it to him. So before you join, I was just saying to Michelle, thank you very much.
Are we live?
We are live.
Jeez, thank goodness.
And you just revealed your age on a live stream.
That's all right. Nothing to be ashamed about.
In this day and age, it certainly is not something to be ashamed about, because unfortunately, not everybody, and that's what we're going to talk about, right? Not everybody's living to the age that they should live to. So I was thanking Michelle because I read the whole report, and I mean it's well put together. So thank you for taking the time to do it. And the last paragraph that you would have written, I want to quote you, but I can't find it. So, but I know it. I think I know the whole report. It's edged into my mind now and in my heart. But you spoke about, you know, the angst and the anxiety and the frustration daily. I cannot begin to feel the pain that you feel working in such a job, if it is that you genuinely care. So putting that last line in, I thought to myself, yeah, I get it.
The last line says that there are days and nights filled with frustration, anxiety, and angst, but we continue to support each other and push our doors, hoping to one day effect change.
Do you think that you're effecting change?
I think we are.
I
think the advocacy, there's a lot of advocacy. The advocacy in this area has been around for a while. And you did refer to the work that you did in relation to advocate for the advocacy for legislative change. So I agree that there has been a lot of work that has been done, but just me saying that is a little bit depressing because we've been doing this work for so long. When we come to measuring the change, that's where the conversation gets a little bit uncomfortable, or the conversation is not as bright as we want the conversation to be. So I do think that there has been change in the sense that legislatively, we have definitely seen not only pieces of legislation come to pass, but we've now had in Trinidad and Tobago a landmark judgment, and that is change. So we have to celebrate those wins, take those wins, and then start to look at how we put those things into effect. The fact that we had the legislative change, and then we had the judgment as well, means that there are a lot of gaps, and those gaps have to be closed. And in the judgment, the court narrowed down who he attributed those gaps, who he thought was responsible, sorry, for those gaps. And it's pretty clear that the police was definitely a major player or non-player, quite frankly, because they were inactive and terribly, tragically, not terribly, tragically so.
So before you came on, and I actually did a video, I did a TikTok video. I'm trying to see if we could spoon feed. So I try to do 1 minute, 2 minute videos and hope that persons wake up. Because I spoke about Samantha Isaac, and I used, I spoke about the judgment, I spoke about the date, and I was taking some fire about my Jaden comment, because I made, some unpopular comments, and if it falls in a garden, so be it. Not trying to be elected for anything. But we have this culture where, everybody's up in arms for 9 days, and then you forget, and then we move on. And then what's the next big fete? So no one's really seeing anything through. No one is picking up the phone and challenging the media. I use the Judith Jones report. I could call Tia's name off the top of my head, because her story, again, etched into my brain. The Paria tragedy. Anybody still cares? Anybody know what's going on? Because I know the Paria board is still there. They're drawing a pay. And we don't seem to have outcry from the citizens that see us into the implementation. So you're saying, we have the landmark judgment, and kudos to that mother, because I have offered so many citizens pro bono work, the Ann and Ram Logans. So this isn't like legal aid. These are big lawyers who have a good track record of winning these types of cases, because we understand how important it is for us to start to get these landmark judgments, for us to start to set precedent in law. And many, many, many citizens refuse. They simply want to forget about it and move on. So kudos to Samantha's mom for taking up the mantle to be able to get us to this space. Now, we use the term landmark judgment. Explain to those watching, what is the landmark judgment? What is a landmark judgment? How is this a victory in the fight against domestic violence?
So kudos to the legal team that worked on this matter. And one of the heroines in this story really is Mrs. Todd Lampkin. Mrs. Todd Lampkin, as you rightfully said, let's put a name to her, let's put a proper name to the case. That's her mommy. That's Samantha's mommy. And she really pushed. Her legal team also pushed. So one of the young attorneys that worked on this case, a guy called Clay Hackett, he really had the passion. So when you talk about people having the public outcry or the passion for the advocacy, he's a young male who really pushed this case forward. And he had an excellent senior by the name of Mr. Douglas Mendes, senior counsel. So that kind of advocacy and passion comes through when you look at the pleadings in the case. The case is landmark because now the judge has made it very clear that there is a positive obligation on behalf of the police, and I'm going to narrow down, if you don't mind, because our remit is only on the police, not on the judiciary, but there is a positive obligation on the police to investigate matters of domestic violence. It is not a private issue. It is not only that something that happens within the walls of your bedroom or the walls of your house, or between lovers, or between spouses and family members. It is not private. You have while it may be considered private in layman's terms, because we have to make sure everybody understands that the police, they have a positive obligation to investigate any allegation that is domestic violence related. These allegations are criminal in nature, right? So they should not be treated any differently from any other report of a slap, an assault, a stabbing, a cuffing, a fighting, or a threat. right? Verbal abuse, that they should not be treated any differently. And the court made that perfectly clear. We're not breaching anybody's constitutional rights. That's essentially what it's saying. We are not breaching anybody's constitutional rights. The police have a positive obligation. And that is why it's a landmark judgment. It shifts, right? It justifies the shift in the way in which police officers operate.
You said you're not breaching any constitutional rights. Just to clear that up for our listening audience, meaning that, for example, a woman or the police officer can argue that, listen, she has a right to privacy, so we can't get involved.
The right to private life, right? You have your right to private life. What happens between us, that's our private business. You can't get involved in that. And what this case is saying is, hold on. When a victim comes to the police, this is not a private life issue. You have to investigate this matter. You have a positive obligation to go out and take action, right? You have a positive, you can go and arrest, you can do an investigation, you could go into the people's homes if it is that an arrestable offense is taking place. You don't just warn somebody if he is abusing you or if she is abusing you.
So let me ask a question. The wife partner brings a report, she says, this is happening, but she doesn't want to press charges. How does that work?
Right. Well, this is 2024, right? So even if a victim does not want to press charges, and you were correct to say partner, because partner could be anyone, yeah. Right? The legislation does need to be tweaked in relation to that. But when the partner makes an allegation and all the police will have is her version of what happened, they may be frustrated in their attempts, but the matter does not end there. There are other ways to bring evidence before the court. And recently, we had very senior police officers reminding the public that neighbors are witnesses. Children or relatives that live in a home, in a communal arrangement, like extended families and so, they are excellent witnesses. Sometimes, not sometimes, most of us have CCTV footage in and outside of our homes. Sometimes there are incidents that are recorded using mobile devices. Neighbors also hear most of the time the violence that takes place in the home, and sometimes people are dragged outside of their homes or they are chased with cutlasses or beaten in the front yard. They are also witnesses in the matter. You can also have medical evidence that could be tendered without the witness. So you don't need the victim to tender his or her medical evidence. And the law has changed for many years now. This has been on our books, that even if the victim gave his or her first report or her first statement and she didn't want to follow through, that can be tendered into court, yes, without her. Now in the TTPS and at the PCA, we use audio-visual technology. So we are actually able to bring to court what that witness originally said, not only the words, the demeanor, the way they said it, all of that is available in 2024. So even if a witness no longer wants to proceed, the law allows us to make an application and put in the original statement, or if we did it audio-visually, we'll put in the video.
What about a third party? So you said, someone gets dragged out of their home, the neighbor witnesses it. Does the neighbor have an obligation by law to make that call, to go and file a report and say, listen, this is happening, I've seen it, and I'm prepared to testify?
I wouldn't say there's a legal obligation on the neighbor. For sexual offenses and where there's sexual abuse, there is an offense called failure to make a report. So if there is, and that's a criminal offense, you'll be charged for that. So if it's that kind of abuse that's taking place and you are not reporting it, you will be charged.
But we're not there yet with the domestic violence legislation.
we are not there with the domestic violence legislation.
Okay. But it's a human obligation.
It is a good form of evidence. It definitely is a persuasive piece of evidence to put before the court. And in the criminal courts, we call that IC. So if that witness sees it, in other words, I see, right? That's what the neighbors are bringing to the table. In many circumstances, that evidence, you mightn't even want to cross-examine that witness. You mightn't really even want, and that could be admitted by something, we call that a formal admission. In other words, your neighbor not lying. It is what it is, and that evidence is not challenged. Under the Domestic Violence Act, in part, what is useful is that there is something called an admission, so that they will consent not to the abuser, right? Or the respondents are using legal terms, but the abuser in inverted brackets, they can agree not to engage in any conduct, right? But it's not a formal admission of guilt. So what we find repeatedly with offenders is that when they're confronted with the allegation, when they say it to their face, when they have to stand up in a court of law, you actually find them agreeing to back off. And it's a formal order that is put in place. So there are many ways to go about getting redress without putting that victim in the box.
So you're saying, actually, and I mean, it feels a little bit different to what I read, but when the abuser is confronted with the allegation, they agree to back off. But then we see that and obviously these are just a few cases compared to what you would see on a daily basis.
In court, under the Domestic Violence Act, when you go into court and the allegations are read, there are many, they're called respondents, right? But these are the people who are really engaging in the abusive conduct. They choose not to cross-examine the victim. So the victim never has to go through that process of having to be questioned and cross-examined and so. And they say, listen, I'm not admitting I'm guilty, but I'm going to agree that for 1 year, 3 years, I'm not going to have any conduct with the victim. So you usually find that, and the statistics are there to show that when they are confronted, when they are put in a courtroom, right? When you put them in the courtroom, they are going to agree to back off. The thing is, the problem is we have to get them into the courtroom.
Well, and that's what the next question is, because you're saying, okay, I'm almost a bit worried by this conversation now, because would a woman feel, okay, look, if I go make the report and then I don't want to press charges, or, the police come and start to do an investigation, would that put me in more hot water? Because I think that some women are afraid of it escalating. And I read so many of the stories where before they could reach court, they've been killed, and the restraining orders don't matter, and the reports don't seem to matter. So what is the protection offered to a woman after she's made the report and she started the process, or worse yet, a third party, or she's made the report, but she's afraid or whatever, and now the TTPS is pushing, and do we have any fear that that's going to make this abuser more angry, lash out, a fit of rage? Like the front page 2 days later, not 2 days ago, we have this landmark judgment, and yet months later, so that's in May was the judgment. In October, we have a situation where the sister is saying that he had 4 restraining orders, multiple reports, and nothing was done.
Well, I want to be a little careful how I respond to that, because the incident happened 2 days ago.
So we haven't investigated.
And then there is a matter that we are investigating. So I will just say that when we investigate a matter, it takes more than 2 days to come to any kind of conclusion. And I do find it interesting that investigation was completed and comments are being made justifying the conduct of the police in the matter. So we are still going to investigate the matter. And because the police have very helpfully told the public that they've completed the
They
investigation,
followed. Yeah, and they
we
followed protocol.
under the PCA has the power to monitor and audit that file. And we are very grateful to the senior police officer who put it out there that he completed his investigation. So then we can go and do our work and it shouldn't take so much time. So I suspect I'll get that file hopefully by the end of the week. Yeah, or maybe Monday. Let's give him Monday, please
We'll
God.
give
And
them till Monday.
we can see that file. I think the fear of a victim is a real fear. We can't have this conversation without explaining what battered woman syndrome is. Battered woman syndrome is a form of diminished responsibility. It means that it affects how we perceive things, how the victim perceives things. It means that the victim at times, the symptoms are sometimes paranoia. The symptoms are sometimes, well, it's deep fear, deep fear. The symptoms are a repeated pattern where they return to their lover, their loved ones. There is triggering behavior. The abuse happens again, and they still remain with that loved one. So we can't be tone deaf, right? When we are having this conversation to say, well, you got the order, don't put yourself in a position where they can find you.
And then we
Sometimes-
publish the headline to say stay away from abusers, as though, it's just stay away.
And we have to remember that sometimes the narrative, there's a repeating narrative of stalking, showing up at your workplace, finding you at your relatives' homes, right? So that is a repeated pattern of behavior. These victims can't be held responsible or accountable because if you are suffering from battered woman syndrome, there is a pattern of behavior that comes about with that trauma. So the victim can't be responsible. The police have to be held responsible. So you were asking, well, how do you manage that? The way that you manage that is you arrest people, you charge people, you bring people before the courts. They have to get bail in certain circumstances, depending on the nature of the offense. So when they come up for bail, that is also something that has to be taken into consideration, right? This is not an easy area for victims. So in many cases, they need an exit strategy. An exit strategy means that you have to work with the safe house. You have to work with the police to get you out, get you safe. Sometimes you might even have to leave the jurisdiction in certain circumstances, and that's where you ask your family to help you if you have relatives abroad and that kind of thing, right? But the way, and the judge addressed this, the way you deal with that fear, that trauma, is that you use, when I say you rely on the police to arrest, investigate, charge, and bring before the court. That must work hand in hand with safe houses. It must work because that victim needs an exit strategy in those cases.
You said something, I did not write it down, and now it's like, what was the follow-up from that? Oh, Lossie, Gary Griffith has joined us already. Gary, you're going to stay as quiet as you can because we're not ready just yet for you. I'm going to bring David into the conversation now. And David, you will let me know if you're willing to have Gary answer right away or not. But in the report, what I saw was that the Police Complaints Authority, which would be you, went to the Commissioner of Police at the time, which would be Mr. Griffith, and recommended action be taken against the officer. Most of the cases are before his time, because I think the last case was 2018 that was addressed in the report. But certainly the recommendation was in April 2019. So I checked to see who would have been the Commissioner of Police at the time. And, it's our good friend Gary, who does not shy away from the media. So Yeah, David, over to you. You spoke about. Okay, I guess I'm wondering. I'm gonna just let you talk first.
Well, as you know or may not know, and this is where the public should know, our remit is that we investigate criminal matters involving police officers, um, police corruption, and serious disciplinary offenses. So once we do our investigation and we make a referral, we make the referral to the Commissioner of Police and or the DPP. And that is where our remit ends, okay? That is where we don't have any we are functus, we cannot do anything more. Now the act was amended in 2020, so after 3 months now, we can then ask the Commissioner of Police or the DPP what's going on with the matter. So we handed the matter over to former Commissioner Griffith, and he was then to set up a tribunal to discipline the officers that were named, what we call defaulters in the matter. I don't know what happened with the matter, so maybe Mr. Griffith can tell us if indeed he did set up the tribunal or not.
All right. Okay, Gary, you're getting permission to join in early.
Oh, okay.
Before he comes on, ask him who won the league in the 80-side oval tournament for our age group.
Well, it's so ironic.
It's a yes. It's an easy answer, Gary.
My side was unbeaten. We didn't lose a game.
Who won, Gary?
And I almost beat David. He would have probably reported me to the domestic violence unit. I almost beat him. It was a draw. So, congratulations, Gary? David. David's team beat us by 1 goal difference.
Who won, Gary?
I'm getting a bad connection on it. Congratulations, David. We'll take it in the knockout.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, Gary. So what happened there?
Oh, Gary, I honestly can't recall that one. But what usually happens is every time, Marsha, and good afternoon, everyone. Okay. Unfortunately, I have tried constantly. It is very unfortunate that the PCA, I don't want to try to devalue what the PCA should be, but the toothless bulldog is what is killing the value of the PCA. The PCA should be similar to the internal affairs in the United States. So they will do exactly what David said. You give it to the commissioner. The commissioner, I have no authority to investigate. It will be given to another body. And at times it can be himself unto himself. So I cannot take action until the police, whether it is the police complaint authority, division, or whoever would now look at what was compiled by the PCA. If they decide to override it, or they decide to state that there's not enough evidence, it then becomes, and David and Michelle, you all could interrupt at any time. It means that a police officer who's a batch of another police officer, and I'm not saying that is done constantly, but it is inappropriate that you have an external body investigating the police, and then all they do is to submit the file and findings back to the police for the police to decide whether they should go forward.
But in the report, the report is quoted as saying that the police complaints division, separate to the police complaints authority. So I'm assuming the police complaints authority is the independent body. Police complaints division is inside of the TTPS.
Correct.
So, David, when you speak about the tribunal, I'm assuming that is where the police complaints division would have taken over, and they reported saying that there was not sufficient evidence. So, Gary, is it that you're saying?
No, they didn't say. But just to make something clear, they didn't say that there was insufficient evidence. What had happened is that it was clear that there was a passing of the buck. So, and then to use layman's terms, the junior officers claimed that they didn't know that they were supposed to investigate the matter. That is what the evidence says, right? And this is now a matter of public record, so I'm not prejudicing any proceeding.
No, it's there, yeah.
It's there. So they passed the buck to say, we didn't know that we were supposed to do X, Y, and Z. Now, let me remind everybody that the allegations included threats and the possession of a knife and a firearm. And all they elected to do at the end was to warn the gentleman who subsequently went up the hill, shot the girl, and killed himself. So there was a passing of the buck, and then eventually the PCD found that the senior officer who was supposed to assign the matter and have supervision of the matter was not to be blamed. Right? So they
The
just
reason I use the no evidence is just a quote from the report. Regrettably, the Commissioner of Police took no further action relative to the foregoing, as the Police Complaints Division concluded from their investigation that there was no evidence to implicate Acting Corporal S for wrongdoing.
So what happens is we do our investigation, and that's what Mr. Griffith is referring to. We do our investigation. We do a full investigation. The matter is assigned to the commissioner. We send it, we refer it to the commissioner. The commissioner then has to hand it over to that division. What then happens is, to my mind, duplicitous, right? They're repeating the work. They then go and do their own investigation, and that is brother investigating brother. That's what we're talking about, right? The police taking the PCA's independent file, holding the independent file, and then doing over investigation. So after the PCD did their own investigation, brother investigating brother, they found that there was nothing to send for the tribunal to look at, because this, as far as they were concerned, the senior police officer was not responsible.
Gary, as the Commissioner of Police, is there nothing you could do, or is that overstepping?
No, it would be an overstep. There were many situations where things would be taking place, and anytime I try to overstep my authority, it will have interference. So I have to be very careful not to interfere in that aspect as the officer, the Commissioner of Police. But it was really ridiculous. You have an independent body doing a thorough investigation. They come up with findings, and then put it upon yourself to say, well, I don't think it is enough. And then A blames B, B blames C, which is the reason why that gender-based violence unit was formed, to deal specifically with the things I heard Michelle speaking about. We have a situation, before I became commissioner, the stories that I heard of women turning up in a station, and because they were assaulted, they were being chased out of the station improperly dressed. Others, after being raped, you stay on a bench for 20 hours waiting because you can't take a shower. Then you have persons who go into stations, and then if the police officer himself is an abuser, he's telling the woman, well, why you reach home 2 o'clock in the morning, why you didn't cook? And then sometimes when they go home, the person who has been accused already knows, because the police officer contacted him, hey, your wife just reported you. The gender-based violence was formed specifically to put an end to that, which is why you'll see 2019 to 2021, there was hardly any concern. What happened is I brought in Giuliani and partners, brought in experts to show us how to form that unit. We formed the online reporting, the police app. We started doing we come to your home. We don't want, when you're beaten or abused or raped, you have to go to a police station where an officer is not trained. All what has happened now is that has totally collapsed. We had the clear guy, Alan. We had officers trained to understand the confidentiality, the sensitivity of such a thing. People get seniority, they get promoted, they all move out. So the majority, when last have you heard of the gender-based violence unit? Not really for the last 2 or 3 years. People don't even know how to get how to contact
well, to interrupt you, there's part of the report, it says that to date, no response from the gender-based violence unit to these requests. Page 5, right? So Michelle, David, Gary, is the next fight to give the Police Complaints Authority, well, teeth, as Gary would call it?
Well, no, you see, the thing is that, as Michelle says, and we agree, that we have done our job. We have done what the Act says we have to do.
So maybe the Act needs to... So you spoke about,
now.
Hold on.
But Marsha, hold on. If it is that we make our referral, the police have to do their job. The DPP
but they're not.
Well, then it's not our fault. Don't blame the PCA.
I know it's not your fault.
But everybody says it's the PCA. We have no teeth. But we do what we have to do under the Act. We cannot go outside the Act. Otherwise, we'll be overstepping our bounds. We have done what we're supposed to do. If the police supposed to do what they're supposed to do, it would work. Understand? We are just part of a relay team. But if they are not taking up the baton, well, then it's not our fault. We have passed it on.
David, but I don't think it's blame. What we're trying to say, what I am trying to say, even as a politician again, is that it is unfair to the victims, because you're doing your job and it is not going through, no fault of your own, but because it's himself unto himself. What should happen should be equivalent to the internal affairs in the United States, where you're not just somebody who will facilitate and compile findings, but you have the authority to be able to implement it. And that is not what is happening. So you have done your job, but it is not being completed because I see probably flaws in our legislation, that you have this external body doing all the excellent work, and then it will just be sidelined. And that is why, Marsha, when I was commissioner, we will be meeting once a month. And with that, the persons in the different police arms of the police service understood that the days of ignoring the PCA, their findings, they will be communicating with me regularly, and then I will go to them, what is the hold up in this? What is the situation with this? And it shouldn't reach to that with the PCA having to meet the commissioner to find out that we are bad boys not doing our job. They should have the authority to immediately implement it, whether it means that the PCA will have an investigative arm of the police service with officers who are now assigned to the PCA separate and apart, which is similar to the internal affairs.
Right. Now,
I think that's what I'm asking. Is there, so you're saying that, you are obviously doing your job based on what the act requires. What I'm suggesting as a policymaker, should we be changing the act so that after you've done your investigation, because that feels almost like a commission of inquiry, you come, you do all the work, everything is presented to you, you have the file in front of you, and now the TTPS, who's the same TTPS that we're complaining about, who didn't do their job in the first place. That's what your folder says. Your investigation concludes that the TTPS didn't do their job.
But Marsha, the TTPS for example, that's the corporal and the sergeant on the ground not doing their job. They have the seniors, they have the ACP, the DCPs. They have them to make sure that they're doing their job. So, they are the ones at fault. You understand? So they're the ones that should be disciplined, or something there should be a body, or there should be a mechanism in place for them to be responsible. You understand? So the PCA has done.
I thought that you were the mechanism to make them responsible, to make them do their job.
Yeah.
Because it feels as though, from looking on, right? Why would I want to come to the PCA? Why would I want to take the time to make a report to say, listen, and I'm going to give you a real story that's happening, right? It's happening, so it's still happening. Gary, I was on vacation and I'm messaging saying, Gary, give me a number for somebody in the gender-based violence unit. Because this lady, who years ago, her hand was chopped off. So this is somebody, her husband is still harassing her. And she cannot get action. And she reached out to me because, I'm back on TV now, so people see. And she said, can you help? He is living in the house. They're not removing him because the restraining order hasn't been served. The rent coming out of her pocket. She don't know what to do. She's going to have to go back home soon because she can't keep just taking room by somebody here, somebody there, and she doesn't have money to pay rent because he's living in what she paying rent, and she's going crazy. Months, nobody has served the restraining order. Months.
So right, so to answer your question,
to have a private person find it, because that's what they always say. Well, we can't find them. You pay a private server, they find them in less than a day. Why would they come to you to say, I'm filing a report, blah, 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 blah. You guys do an investigation. The investigation finds that, yes, we know the officer didn't do your work. What's next?
Because we are the only body in Trinidad and Tobago that could collect that evidence in an independent manner. We are the only people who do that. So when PCD is compiling their information, there is no way that you can say that process is independent. As a matter of fact, I would even throw out the challenge as to whether or not it's even transparent. PCD had the evidence by the PCA. It's the way that they interpreted it. It's the way that they viewed the evidence. And that is where the problem is. They still have a dated, outdated, tone deaf, and now illegal and wrong interpretation as to what their role is. So the evidence is there, The problem is, what are you doing with the evidence? And the court has now made it, they put it in black and white. If you didn't understand the law before, you understand the law now. There is no way you could look at that evidence and not discipline those officers. And that is where the problem is. The PCA
Okay,
is the only, sorry, but the PCA is the only body that is collecting that in, and we're not holding papers to anybody. We have no bias. We just doing our work, and when we finish our work, we send it to them. It's the people who are making these decisions who don't understand that if these officers are not disciplined, then the citizens are not going to get the help that they need. And we have to ask ourselves, why are we not disciplining? Why are we afraid to discipline these officers? Recently, the TTPS adopted, I know Mr. Griffith is here, so that's why I'm saying recently, not him. Recently, they adopted the stance that they would train their officers. Now, I have to say that we welcome the training. We agree that you can have training. We always support any initiative for training. But without a big stick policy, how is this going to work? And why is there, I don't mind having the conversation, but why don't you want to apply a big stick?
And Justice Frank C. Prasad, it wasn't about domestic violence, but I mean, there are so many cases before the court where unfortunately, the TTPS, that officers costing the state money. And Justice Frank C. Prasad had actually said that it's time that police officers pay out of their own pocket. I have a matter before the court. Gary was the commissioner of police at the time, and my constitutional rights were ignored. And you're going to be before the court, and when I win, it's not the officer. So it doesn't matter. They can do what they want because they're not coming from their pocket. They're not getting a day off. It matters not. So I agree that there has to be some consequence that the actual officer feels. But what I'm asking is, and you've said it, so nobody here is saying that the Police Complaints Authority, so the PCA, isn't independent. No one is challenging that. But what I feel is it's very similar to what we saw with the Commission of Inquiry into Paria. It's clear, the evidence is there. An independent body has made the suggestions. They have formalized it, and they have said, this is what we believe needs to happen. But all it is it's like the UN writing a strong worded letter to a country.
I think there's one difference here with the PCA to these commissions. Whereas in the commissions, you have retired judges, you have civilians you hire, and they come up with findings. They just compile stuff. And that is why whether it is the Scott Drug report, the Stanley John report, the Judith Jones report, all of these things is based on persons who do not have investigative training. The PCA is not like that. The PCA has persons suitably qualified.
Even more so.
Exactly.
Even more so. So after they've given, so the recommendation shouldn't be, if they give a recommendation to the Commissioner of Police, then the recommendation should almost, with your eyes closed, happen.
Correct,
there
but it's not.
Be a need for another investigation. Yeah. So correct. How do we? So is that a legislative issue? And that's basically what I'm asking. Because we need to move past saying, well, this is what happens. What we need is, it should happen. So the PCA did their job. They gave you a file. They did the investigation, and they concluded. They gave. Let me quote it just to make sure, right? What is? No, not this one. Let me find the page. What is the page?
I think it was 7 or 8. Okay.
I like that you all know the page better than me.
Yeah, because I
don't want to volunteer the page. I want to see where you're going.
Page 7. So the PCA uncovered critical information which demonstrated that there was an inaction by the police relevant to the reports made, and recommendation was made to the Commissioner of Police in April 2019 for disciplinary action to be considered against the defaulting officer. There is nothing there that says the PCA recommended another investigation.
But that's how it works.
There was a clear recommendation.
And it's
so how we reach to the point of another investigation?
Because the PCA does not have the actual authority to go through the final process of charging. which is
And
why
that's why I'm asking if it's a matter for the policymakers inside of Parliament to bring a bill before the court to give the PCA something else.
And
That's
the
where
answer
y'all will
is,
have to come up with the jargon of it. I am just a woman who want to see other women not get beaten and stabbed and whatever. So y'all could come up with whatever the language is. The PCA did their job. They investigated it and they made a clear recommendation. We need to see and we need to know what's the next step from that recommendation. And David, with all due respect, I don't want to hear Lady TTPS do their work. They're not doing their work. So we need something. We need the parliamentarians now to put something else in place to force the TTPS to do their work.
That's it. And it's not just gender-based violence. I have been, my biggest battle was with gang leaders. My biggest battle was the Police Welfare Association, because they will fight me down for every single time I am trying to clean up the image of the police service. I got it at 14% public trust. To get it to 59, my biggest opponent was the Welfare Association. Every time I tried to instill systems to measure their performance and make them accountable, it was a pushback. And you'll see it. Police officers will drive a vehicle going 110 miles an hour without any reason for a response. Crash into somebody. And then the police welfare, and when I push to say that these people should pay for the vehicles, they should be held accountable, the Welfare Association will say it's going to open up Pandora's box. The only way to deal with it is have an independent body, not just do the investigation, but have the authority to go through the final process of the justice system, similar to that of the police, which is the charge.
David, do you agree?
Definitely.
Do you think the PCA can do that? So if we lobby, if we go to, we put Gary as prime minister, whoever, something so, but whoever knows. I started off saying I can say what I want because I'm not trying to be elected for nothing, but if we can get the parliamentarians to bring legislation, do you believe that that's the next step, that we need legislation to maybe widen the remit of the PCA so it goes from just you giving a recommendation to maybe you bringing the charge yourself?
Well, I think before we go there, I think we need a discussion with the police service and us and the politicians or whoever's in power to understand what we want to do and how we want to do it. That's one way of doing it, of getting the PCA that extra power to go ahead and lay the charge and maybe even prosecute the matter.
So what is the conversation? What is that conversation? What should it look like? How do we, because we need to move forward. We need to move the goalpost forward. Right now, so Michelle, you're going to get the file hopefully by Monday. And and if you don't get the file, I'm messaging you because I'm going to do a TikTok video and I'm going to use whatever I can do in my space to generate the pushback that needs to happen. But then all that you're going to be doing is investigating to prove that they didn't do their job.
And that will go on for months, if not years.
What we want is we want them to do their job. So we want something. So if it is that the Police Complaints Authority have good people, they are doing their job, we need to move the conversation forward. So who do we need to bring to the table? What does the conversation need to look like for the next step to happen?
Marsha, let me give you an example. We are now involved in inquests. We are now an interested party in inquests. So before in the past, you had the inquest come and, you had the police officers come and they didn't have witnesses, they had no file, they had nothing. We now, in police-involved shootings, have a very thick file because we have done the investigation and we have a very good file and we have a lot of evidence. We are attending court now, and what's happening? It's been adjourned, this one here, not here. It's the same thing. So we are doing our job again, and the courts this time, in the inquest court, not all the time through the fault of the coroner or whatever, but witnesses are not showing up, police officers are not showing up, etc.
Police officers are not showing up.
So again, we have something there that could finish within a month. It's going to take 2 years to finish. So, you understand? So it's a whole big question, a whole that has to determine what do we do with the PCA's evidence that going forward.
Marsha, in terms of the lobbying that you're talking about, we have to be very grateful to you and other media personalities and journalists and so that are willing to join the advocacy. So when you ask what is the strategy, The strategy is to have the conversations, and not only conversations, but very loud conversations. And when you are having this type of discussion, we need to be focusing on results as opposed to excuses. So I'm not saying to put the TTPS in a position where they feel that they're being attacked or that they're feeling constantly criticized, right? I don't think that is going to be productive. But maybe they need to change the narrative, because some of these comments that they have been making, I really don't think it is easily digestible. And maybe the conversation needs to be, let's hear about results and let's don't hear about excuses, because that is the constant rhetoric, and that's why you and other people are getting frustrated with the process. So somebody needs to say in PCD why they decided not to discipline the officers, and why these are not matters that are attracting discipline. Why are they only training people to investigate an assault? And this is why I have a little bit of a problem. Domestic violence crimes are mostly summary offenses. And when I say summary offenses, that means the lesser offenses. Isn't that complicated? It's not a complicated case. So for me to hear in 2024 that you are still training officers how to investigate a matter, that means you're training them how to investigate an assault, how to investigate a wounding, how to investigate a fight, how to investigate a cuss case, how to investigate verbal threats, how to investigate possession of a firearm, how to investigate use of an offensive weapon. What they need the training on is how they engage with these vulnerable victims, right? But how long is that going to go on for? The first manual that was published from the Attorney General's office was in 2003. That's 20 years ago. So you mean to tell me you still need to train people on how to deal with vulnerables? I have a little problem with that. And when I say little, I'm being sarcastic, right? That is not digestible. And we have so much technology available to us. We have so many experts available to us, right? This is not a narrow field that it now came about. This has been going on as you started off the program talking about. So we have many experts and many people with experience in this field. So that is where I have a little bit a problem digesting some of what I've been hearing about training. Training is not Trump, right? Like it's not. When I say Trump, I don't mean the politician, right? I know Mr. Griffith is on the show, right? But I don't. I don't mean that kind. I don't mean that. You know what I mean by Trump? You can't lash out that as Trump and expect to get an award, right? You have to do better than that.
But if I could, excuse my anger. That was because of what Michelle was saying. Cuba just equalized on Trinidad and Tobago, so I was a little peeved. What happened, however, Michelle, is that the training for police officers in this type of crime, it is a specific type of training, and it was mind blowing for us. From prior to Gary Griffith, we believe that any police officer could deal with this by just doing basic training. I got Mayor Rudy Giuliani and partners, brought them into Trinidad and Tobago, brought in the NYPD. And this group, they were trained specifically to understand how to deal with this type of crime. Because how you speak to a female who has just been battered or raped, you have to understand how to speak to her. The more if you speak in the wrong manner, she's going to close up. You have to speak to her in such a way for her to remember everything. And all of these persons, the majority of them who got that specific type of training have all left the gender-based violence unit. So you're back now and not. So who's going to train these persons? This is a special type of training that is not in Trinidad and Tobago. Trust me on that. So it's not about customer service or public relation. And it's a problem that we've had, not just in the police service, the defense force. You send someone to United Kingdom, you spend $5 million to train to do communication, you bring him down to be in charge of the kitchen. So Claire Guy Allen understood this. That gender-based violence was working. We got a massive spike in reports, and I thought, well, we're doing the wrong thing. It was just the opposite. NYPD said, when women start understanding that they can trust the police, you're going to start getting them to make more reports. And then now you have to pinpoint the perpetrators by constantly letting them know we are watching you, we are monitoring you. We started going to your home. somebody beat your husband beat you, we don't want you to come to the station. We will come to your home. It was a customer service delivery. All of that now has virtually been shut down. You're telling the women now, you have a report, just go to a station. It doesn't work that way. It's causing the lack of trust, and we have to bring it back. My final point on that, again, going back to the PCA, it is just legislation to change that the persons who have the authority in the PCA, police officers who they would select, have the authority to charge. It is not no big maths that you have to change that. If you ask Michelle or David, the PCA is a fire hazard in this country. The number of files that they have just on hold, waiting, and it is hundreds upon hundreds every year that the police will deliberately, or based on bad management, based on not training, they will just hold it for years until the matter dies. And because of that, it means that that situation where the officers realize that there's no longer a situation where I can now be culpable. I will wait my time. It will drag on. This is what Michelle, I mean, I love to hear Michelle talking. She expects that to come on Monday. I will talk to you by Christmas and that matter will still be investigated.
Well, guys, it's 6 o'clock. Maybe we should have just had you guys on from 4 o'clock because we've run out of time. David, I'm so sorry. We didn't even get to talk about all the different the different arms of police other than domestic violence, but it is 6 o'clock. So thank you very, very much, Michelle. Keep up the good work. And I really hope that we can see some big changes, and we're not seeing once again allegations where a mom is slit, throat is slit, and she's saying she's made reports, and just waiting on the TTPS to act. So, guys, Thank you very much.
Marsha, come to football next week Friday. I have something for David. You will have to report to the football violence unit.
Next week Friday. Remind me. Okay, guys.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Marsha. Okay.
Thank you so very much, Marsha, and her special guests for Hard Talk today at Power 102 Digital. Marsha will be back next Thursday.